Mike McCarthy is officially the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that single decision immediately shifts the entire conversation about where this franchise is heading and how serious the organization is about trying to win right now. This is not a symbolic hire, and it is not a move designed to buy time. Everything about this decision points to urgency, to short-term competitiveness, and to a belief inside the building that the Steelers are much closer than many people outside of Pittsburgh might think. Whether fans love the hire or are still wrestling with mixed feelings, the reality is simple. McCarthy is here, and the direction of this team will now be defined by the staff he builds around him. Starting with one position that may decide the success or failure of this era almost immediately, the defensive coordinator. This roster is not being set up for a teardown or a long rebuild. The organization has made that clear through both words and actions. Art Rooney II and Omar Khan are operating with the mindset that the Steelers should be competing for a championship every single year, and that philosophy did not change with the coaching transition. The defense, in particular, reflects that belief. There is significant money invested on that side of the ball, there is veteran talent at multiple levels, and there is no excuse for that unit not to be among the very best in the NFL. For this team to take a real step forward in the first year under McCarthy, the defense cannot simply be good. It has to be elite. That is why the defensive coordinator hire carries so much weight. McCarthy is an offensive-minded head coach, and while he brings experience, quarterback development history, and a modern offense that still produces results, he will be leaning heavily on whoever he entrusts with the defense. Over the last several seasons, the Steelers did not consistently get the most out of their defensive personnel. The scheme grew predictable, adjustments came slowly, and the unit rarely felt as dominant as its talent suggested it could be. That cannot continue if the goal is to compete with the top teams in the AFC, especially when you look around the league and see that the final teams standing every year are built on high-level defense. The expectation inside the building is not to reset expectations. The expectation is to chase a Super Bowl next season. That is a bold stance, but it explains why this defensive coordinator decision is so critical. Given the quarterback options potentially available, the Steelers cannot rely on offense alone to carry them deep into January. To truly contend, this defense must resemble the very best units in the league, the kind of groups that dictate games, erase mistakes, and win playoff matchups. McCarthy understands this, and history shows that when he pairs himself with the right defensive coordinator, his teams win consistently. That brings us to the type of candidates who are now being discussed behind the scenes and around the league. The first group includes coaches with direct or indirect ties to McCarthy, individuals he knows, respects, or is connected to through trusted colleagues. Carl Scott, currently the pass game coordinator and defensive backs coach in Seattle, fits that description. While he has not worked directly for McCarthy, his daily collaboration with Aiden Durd, a former McCarthy assistant in Dallas, creates a strong professional link. Scott is associated with the modern big nickel defensive structure used under Mike Macdonald, a system built on flexibility, coverage disguise, and adaptability. With the personnel Pittsburgh has, that style of defense could translate extremely well. Another familiar name in these discussions is Al Harris. Harris has already drawn interest around the league and brings a clear identity wherever he goes. Aggressive coverage, heavy man principles, single high safety looks, and pressure designed to force offenses into uncomfortable situations define his approach. Harris worked directly under McCarthy in Dallas as both defensive backs coach and assistant head coach, and his defenses reflect that attacking mindset. If he were the choice, fans should expect a defense that challenges receivers at the line of scrimmage and takes calculated risks. Joe Witt Jr. is another longtime McCarthy associate, having coached alongside him in both Green Bay and Dallas before following Dan Quinn to Washington. His resume includes experience calling plays at the highest level and helping guide a defense to an NFC Championship game. While his most recent stint ended under difficult circumstances, context matters, and his familiarity with McCarthy makes him a logical name to monitor. Whether as defensive coordinator or in another key defensive role, Leslie Frazier, Patrick Graham, and Jason Simmons all represent different variations of experience, adaptability, and connection to McCarthy's coaching tree. Frazier brings a calm, modern defensive philosophy built around two high safety structures and discipline. Graham is known for tailoring his scheme to the talent available, a trait learned during his time in New England, and Simmons offers both league-wide respect and a direct personal connection to the Steelers organization from his playing days. The common thread here is that McCarthy is not locked into one defensive identity. He has shown throughout his career that he is willing to hire outside his comfort zone if he believes the coach can elevate the team. That openness expands the field and makes this hire even more intriguing. This job is attractive, the roster is talented, expectations are clear, and the head coach is experienced enough to give his coordinator real authority. Everything about this moment suggests the Steelers are standing at the edge of a defining transition. The defensive coordinator decision will tell us exactly how McCarthy plans to attack the league and how serious this organization is about immediate success. From your perspective as a Steelers fan, which defensive direction do you believe gives this team the best chance to win right now, and why? When you widen the lens beyond the candidates with direct ties to Mike McCarthy, the picture actually becomes even more fascinating, because it highlights just how attractive this defensive coordinator job really is. One of the most important things to understand about McCarthy's history is that he is not rigid when it comes to building a staff. In Dallas, some of his most successful hires were coaches he had never worked with before. That tells you this search is not limited to familiarity or comfort. It is about finding the right football mind to maximize a roster that is already built to win now. That is why names without any direct McCarthy connection still matter so much in this conversation. Raheem Morris is one of the most intriguing possibilities. He is widely respected around the league, runs a modern defense, and has extensive experience coordinating at a high level. Maurice has already been a head coach multiple times, and that reality changes the dynamics of his career path. Teams know what he is as a head coach, which makes it less likely that he would be quickly poached away if he settles into a defensive coordinator role. For an offensive-minded head coach like McCarthy, finding a long-term defensive partner in that mold is exactly how sustained success is built. Morris has coached elite defensive talent, commands respect in the locker room, and would be given full autonomy in Pittsburgh. With the level of talent on this defense, it is easy to see why that combination could be appealing. Another name that stands out is Dante Jones, currently the pass game coordinator in Minnesota under Brian Flores. Around the league, Flores' defense is viewed as one of the most innovative and difficult to prepare for, built on aggressive disguises, post-snap rotations, and constant pressure from unexpected angles. Flores himself has credited Jones with playing a major role in designing those concepts. That detail matters. Jones represents the opportunity to bring an elite defensive structure to Pittsburgh without some of the friction that has followed Flores at previous stops. He has already interviewed with multiple teams, which tells you how highly regarded he is. And his schematic creativity aligns perfectly with what this Steelers defense could become if properly unleashed. Jim Leonhardt also deserves serious consideration. His work with Denver's defense has drawn attention across the league, and while he is still actively coaching, his reputation as a disciplined, intelligent defensive mind continues to grow. Steelers fans who value sound fundamentals combined with modern coverage concepts would find plenty to like in that direction. The same can be said for Anthony Weaver, who was already interviewed for the head coaching position. That alone tells you the organization sees him as a serious football mind. Weaver brings energy, leadership, and familiarity with high-end defensive talent, and if the head coaching market does not materialize for him, a defensive coordinator role in Pittsburgh could make a lot of sense. Aubrey Pleasant and Nick Rallis represent another layer of this discussion. Pleasant has played a key role in developing defensive backs and helping reshape careers in Los Angeles, contributing to a top-tier defensive unit built on discipline, movement, and technique rather than constant blitzing. Rallis, on the other hand, is viewed as one of the brightest young defensive minds in the league, praised for his ability to teach and implement a modern, matchup-based defense. Both options would signal a commitment to evolution rather than recycling ideas that have already grown stale. What all of these candidates share is the opportunity that Pittsburgh presents right now. This is not a rebuild. This is not a waiting period. This is a roster with proven stars, experienced veterans, and a front office that believes the window is open. The defensive coordinator who steps into this role will not be asked to patch holes or survive a transition year. He will be asked to elevate an already talented group into one of the league's most feared units. That is a rare opportunity, and it explains why so many respected coaches are either directly connected to this job or quietly watching how it unfolds.
The McCarthy era will ultimately be judged not just by wins and losses, but by whether the Steelers finally feel modern, adaptable, and dangerous again on both sides of the ball. The defensive coordinator hire is the clearest signal yet of how serious this transformation will be. As this search continues, every name connected to it tells a story about the philosophy McCarthy wants to bring to Pittsburgh and how quickly he expects this team to compete at the highest level. Now it's on you. If you had the final say, which defensive coordinator direction would you want the Steelers to take, and what kind of defense do you believe gives this team the best chance to win right now? Because when you really strip everything down, this entire situation comes back to one unavoidable truth. The margin for error is small, and the expectations are already set. Mike McCarthy did not come to Pittsburgh to oversee a slow transition or to experiment for 2 or 3 seasons while things figure themselves out. The front office did not make this move to be patient. They made it because they believe the Steelers can win now if the structure around the roster is finally aligned the right way. That is why the defensive coordinator choice will define the tone of this era almost immediately. This defense has spent years surviving on talent, effort, and individual brilliance, but not consistently dominating on structure alone. You saw flashes of greatness, but rarely did it feel like opponents were being systematically taken apart week after week. The next coordinator has to change that feeling. He has to bring clarity, flexibility, and an identity that evolves as the league evolves, not one that reacts late. Think about what this defense could be if it is finally deployed correctly. Edge rushers being moved around instead of locked into predictable alignments. Coverage shells that look identical pre-snap but tell a completely different story once the ball is snapped. Pressure that comes from intention, not desperation. Communication that eliminates the mental mistakes that have haunted big moments. This is what separates good defenses from championship defenses, and this is the standard the Steelers are now chasing again. McCarthy has lived both sides of this reality. He has seen what happens when the defensive hire misses, and he has also seen what happens when it hits. In Dallas, the difference between frustration and consistent double-digit wins was not an overhaul of talent, but a change in defensive leadership and philosophy. That lesson matters now more than ever. Pittsburgh is not lacking players. It is searching for cohesion, modern thinking, and a coordinator who can match elite offenses punch for punch in January. This is also why the league is watching this hire closely. Whoever takes this job will be stepping into one of the most pressure-filled coordinator roles in football. The expectations will be immediate. The scrutiny will be relentless. But the reward is just as real. If this defense becomes what it is capable of becoming, the Steelers instantly re-enter the conversation as a legitimate threat in the AFC, not just a playoff participant, but a team nobody wants to see when the season is on the line. Everything McCarthy does next will either reinforce or challenge the belief that this hire was about urgency. The defensive coordinator announcement will tell us whether this organization plans to attack the league aggressively or cautiously. It will tell us whether the Steelers are ready to dictate terms again or remain reactive against the best teams in football. And this is where the emotional side of the fan base really comes into play, because this hire forces an uncomfortable but necessary conversation about identity. For years, Steelers fans have been told that the standard is the standard, that toughness and resilience would always keep this team competitive. And for the most part, that has been true. The Steelers have not collapsed, they have not bottomed out, and they have remained relevant. But relevance is not the same thing as control, and it is not the same thing as fear. The best versions of Steelers football were not just competitive, they were intimidating. Opponents knew exactly who they were facing, and they adjusted their entire game plan around it. That intimidation has been missing, not because the players are soft, and not because the talent is lacking, but because the league caught up schematically. Offenses learned what was coming. Quarterbacks knew where the answers were. And when January arrived, the margin between Pittsburgh and the elite teams became painfully obvious. The McCarthy hire is an admission that the old balance was no longer enough. The defensive coordinator hire will determine